If you know anything about this channel, you know that Ratchet & Clank is one of my favorite franchises of all time. And recently I had the honor of playing through every single Ratchet & Clank game in order. So I've played through the good, the bad, and the what the actual In this video, we will take a look back at every Ratchet & Clank game, including the spin-offs from the PlayStation 2 to the PS5. Welcome to Frame Dropped. This is the one that started it all. In November of 2002, Insomniac Games, the developer behind the Spyro the Dragon series on the PlayStation 1, released a little game called Ratchet & Clank, built off the rendering engine from Jak and Daxter, which their friends Naughty Dog, who in the PS1 days worked together with them in the same office space, developed. A Lombax mechanic on an alien planet witnesses a spaceship crash, and upon investigating, finds a little robot companion and agrees to help him. A more intricate setup was needed to start off one of the greatest gaming adventures of all time, which later leads to the quest of defeating Chairman Drek, whose evil plan consists of creating a new planet by destroying others. In case you never played a Ratchet & Clank game, clicked on this video by accident, your browser froze and you can't stop the video, Ratchet & Clank is a third-person platformer and shooter with various crazy weapons and gadgets at your disposal, puzzle and Metroidvania elements, a ton of different planets to explore, and memorable characters with a then still pretty edgy humor.
I bet Captain Quark uses stuff like this all the time.
Ha! Real men can swing without silly toys like that!
You can travel between planets, which visually all differ from each other, and when playing it for the first time it was always a blast unlocking a new planet and seeing how it looked and what there was to discover. While progressing through the game, you'll get various gadgets and upgrades, such as the swing shot, which makes you reach new paths and therefore encourages the player to revisit older planets in order to discover new things, or Clank's helipack, which makes traversal even more fun than it already is. Ratchet & Clank also offers a couple of gameplay sections that are totally different to the running and gunning, such as Clank sections and hoverboard races. Oh, and you can do this. The opinions on these, let's call them additional gameplay sections, seem to differ, especially with the Clank gameplay. But in my opinion, these sections are paced quite well and always break up the main gameplay in a good way. There are also collectibles such as gold bolts that in this game unlock better versions of your weapons, and skill points which were kind of the precursors to trophies and achievements. So a lot of the good stuff was there from the very beginning. On a technical level, the game was very impressive for the year 2002. Just look at how much is going on in the background of Metropolis. It is insane for a game that is almost 20 years old. Probably one of the reasons why it has aged quite well and is still a blast to play through today. This is why every now and then I get the itch of playing through the original trilogy again, and I usually do finish all three games. This very first part is lacking some features that by now are staples of the series, such as upgrading your weapons and armor. For example, popping out the weapon wheel does not stop the gameplay running in the background, which can make some enemy encounters very frustrating if you're unlucky. So just some quality of life stuff that Insomniac Games still had to figure out. For some reason, I do have the most nostalgia for the very first game, probably just because it was the first Ratchet game that I played at a friend's house. Even while past Mr. Framedropped is sitting here at work and writing the script to this video, he is thinking about exploring the colorful Novalis, seeing the impressive skyline of Metropolis for the first time, and getting sentimental at one of the to this day best pieces of storytelling in the video game. More on that later. I need to play this game again. One year later, in 2003, Ratchet & Clank 2, or Going Commando in the US, and therefore the start of sexual innuendos in some of their titles, was released to the world. Although Insomniac Games had only about 8 months of development time, with a team that started off with only 40 people, this sequel improves upon almost every aspect of its predecessor, at least gameplay-wise. James Arnold Taylor was introduced as the new voice of Ratchet because the developers felt that Ratchet was too much of a jerk in the first game, so with the personality change came a new voice that stayed with Ratchet until this day. Many people consider this one to be the best Ratchet & Clank game. For me personally, that is not the case, but it's still one of my favorite Ratchet games. The story, a genetically modified protopet was stolen and Abercrombie Fizzwidget, as CEO who seems kinda familiar, asks Ratchet & Clank to find it. That doesn't appeal to me that much, but maybe that's just because I have the most nostalgia towards the first game and I played the third game the most, so this one falls somewhere in between. Also, Going Commando is definitely more combat heavy than the first title, which was mainly a platform. But honestly, playing these games back to back again made me realize how much of a difference the more refined mechanics since the first game actually make. Even little things, such as strafing and that bringing out the weapon wheel finally freezes the game in the background, make a huge difference gameplay-wise. Going Commando is just packed with content and stuff to discover. Everything that was good about the first game returns, and more. This time, there are many more gameplay sections that differ from the usual, such as space combat and hoverbike races. I'm not the biggest fan of the former, but the hoverbike races are really fun and have quite refined mechanics for its time. The challenge mode, so basically the New Game Plus mode that almost every Ratchet game has, was already a thing in the first game, but being able to upgrade and modify your weapons further in this mode make a second playthrough so much more fun. Since Going Commando, I therefore played through every Ratchet & Clank game at least twice in order to get all of the upgrades. Also, the new locations are extremely memorable, with some more open areas that let you explore them in order to collect crystals and, in conclusion, bolts, and I really like that. Oh, and there's also a combat arena with various challenges for the first time, which I absolutely loved and spent so much time in. Oh, and there's also the Insomniac Museum, which is one of the best things ever. Ratchet & Clank 2 is just a fantastic game. As I said a couple of seconds ago, Ratchet & Clank 3, or Up Your Arsenal, is the Ratchet game that I've probably played the most, and quite frankly, it is also my favorite Ratchet & Clank game. That still holds true after playing through the games back to back recently. Gameplay-wise, Up Your Arsenal doesn't do anything unexpected. Being released in 2004, it takes the already refined mechanics of the second game, cranks them up to 11, brings back my beloved crystal searching, and adds some new things such as more combat-focused missions, the Starship Phoenix, which is a hub area that is one of my favorite things about this game, and even a 2D side-scrolling minigame where you play as Quark that is actually not bad at all. Story-wise, Up Your Arsenal introduces the evil robot nemesis Dr. Nefarious, who since then has been reintroduced many times for better or for worse. You decide. Nefarious wants to wipe out all organic life forms in favor for an all-robot utopia, with him as the leader, obviously, with the help of the Galactic Rangers, Skid, Al, Helga, and even Quark, who has been through some shit. Ratchet & Clank tries to stop that from happening. This game just turns the heat up. From the available weapons to the set pieces, boss fights and worlds that you can explore, I love it so much. Ratchet & Clank 3 again features different gameplay sections, only this time they consist of ranger missions that are more like go there, do this, destroy that target, capture that base. But what could be very generic is made up with a variety of vehicles, such as the turbo slider, hover ships, which are pretty cool, and even turrets. Is a turret a vehicle? What is a turret? I mean, there's even the Theraguise, a gadget that turns you into a one-eyed Theranoid in order to access high-security areas. There are missions as Clank on the film set of his own movie Secret Agent Clank, and there's this.
I see the future, and what do I see? Robots going crazy across the galaxy.
You know,
As you can see, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal is loaded up to the brim with things that make Ratchet & Clank great. I also really like the variety of the level design. Florana, Aquatos, and Obani Draco are some of my favorite planets. Alright, I could go on and on and on, but we still have a few titles that we want to take a look at. By the way, is it too late to mention that the footage you have been seeing is actually from the HD collection on the PS3? Since it came out, I have been playing these games in this way instead of the PS2 versions, and I always thought that the HD collection is the best way to experience them, but now I'm not so sure about that anymore. All of the games have weird bugs and graphical glitches all over the place, especially the third one. Not that it really matters, but I just wanted to mention it really quick. So, where was I? Oh yeah, Ratchet & Clank 3, my favorite Ratchet game and possibly one of the best video games of all time. If you haven't played it, pause the video here and go and play it. Some call it a spin-off, some call it the last mainline PS2 Ratchet & Clank game, some call it Gladiator, and some call it Deadlocked. Some call it Weißwurstsalat! Okay, maybe nobody does that, but Ratchet Deadlocked is different, which is apparent even from the exclusion of Clank in the title. The developers wanted to try something new and head to a darker direction, heavily inspired by more mature games such as Halo. The result is a Ratchet & Clank game that is much more focused on combat than platforming or anything else really. The setup, Ratchet and some other contestants are kidnapped in order to participate in the illegal Dread Zone tournament. This kinda plays out like Galactic Ranger missions in the previous game, so kinda generic missions on different planets that you can select and replay from a list. This game lacks the charm, narration and memorable locations of the first 3 games, with Orkson being the only returning one, but damn is the combat addicting. Less weapons, yes, less, but with various customization options. Insomniac opted for quality over quantity here, which was definitely the right call, and really refined the combat experience. And again, there are a couple of different vehicles that break up the usual gameplay. As a kid, I didn't really like Deadlocked that much, and I think that might be because I expected a sequel to Up Your Arsenal, so more of the same. And this game is same, but different. It is very possible that my views towards this game didn't improve that much, because I also played the HD version of Gladiator, which is just riddled with bugs and graphical glitches and is therefore by far the worst HD port of any of the PS2 era Ratchet games. But still, nowadays I appreciate the game way more, but it's still not exactly the gameplay experience that I want from a Ratchet & Clank game, and therefore not my favorite of the bunch. But legend has it that there are people out there who absolutely fucking love it. Returning to the series' fascination with more obvious sexual innuendo titles, Ratchet & Clank Size Matters was released in 2007 for the PlayStation Portable. This game later also received an inferior PS2 version, but even on the PSP, the reviews were lukewarm at best. One of the reasons for that might be that this game was not developed by Insomniac directly, but by a studio called High Impact Games, who later went on to make gaming history, with gems such as the Wii version of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 and Disney Princess My Fairy Tale Adventure. The game begins in Poketaro, where Ratchet & Clank's vacation is interrupted by a schoolgirl named Luna, who wants the heroes to fight some bad guys so she can take pictures for a school project. Yeah, I know. She's then abducted by a mysterious force, which kicks off this first portable adventure. The gameplay, while a little simplified and adapted to the control scheme of the PSP, is basically still the same Ratchet & Clank gameplay that we all know. New additions include an armor system, which allows Ratchet to mix and match pieces of armor, skyboard races, and the sometimes frustrating on-rails giant Clank sequences. It's probably just because of the limitation of the PSP hardware and therefore the simplified engine, but I feel like this game sometimes looks and feels like a knockoff version of the real thing, which is understandable if the game wouldn't also feel unpolished as hell. Maybe it's just because I've never played this game before, but for me this was the most difficult Ratchet game that I have ever played, and I don't mean that in a good way. The difficulty curve seems rather random, and some things, such as that you don't regain your ammo when you die, can lead to some unnecessarily frustrating moments, such as when I actually had to grind for bolts in order to buy more ammo to be able to finally defeat a boss. Speaking about bosses, the final battle against Otto Destruct, yes, I know, felt almost impossibly difficult, until I noticed that I could just use the PDA in order to buy more ammo during the fight, which then made the fight pretty easy. So my first experience with Ratchet & Clank Size Matters was rather frustrating than exciting, but I still feel like people are hating the game a little bit too much. High impact games tried to do something new here, and they for example implemented Clank puzzles, a very cool idea for the grind boots to open locks, and the very first day and night cycle on the day-night moon. Yes, I know, which even changes up the gameplay. All in all, I feel like Size Matters is an awesome PSP game and great to have in your collection. Just compared to the mainline Ratchet games, this one is sadly forgettable. Technically, this game came out after the first PS3 game, but that is weird, so we're talking about it now. And right off the bat, I can tell you that I enjoyed this game much more than Size Matters. 72 on Metacritic? Why did this game get even lower review scores?
What? I don't get it.
This game has charm, is incredibly wacky, and tries out tons of different things, but most importantly, it doesn't feel like it tries to be a mainline Ratchet & Clank game. When the character Secret Agent Clank got introduced in Ratchet & Clank 3 and even received his own missions, the jump to a portable versions of that probably didn't seem too far. This time, Clank actually works for a secret government agency. When Clank sees Ratchet stealing an important item from a museum who is then locked up inside of a prison planet, Clank knows that this couldn't have been the real Ratchet and aims to uncover the truth. With the game that was again made by High Impact Games, the gameplay of Clank and Secret Agent Clank here is built off the same engine as Ratchet in Size Matters, which means that he is more agile and has his own weapons. But even Ratchet didn't feel like Ratchet in Size Matters, so I feel like it's okay for Clank to feel different, especially on a portable platform. The story afterwards is so meh that I already forgot what the hell was going on. But the gameplay itself honestly tries to keep you excited with scenes after scenes that try to top each other in terms of what the f***ness.
Here's the first verse, how I saved everyone from being food for the clan dudes.
I guess this is why Insomniac acknowledged this game to be canon, but only as a holofilm in the Ratchet & Clank universe. As you can see, this time the player controls 3 different characters, Clank, Ratchet and Quark. They all feel kinda samey and are tied to their specific missions, but it's still a neat feature. There are so many sections that completely differ from the main gameplay sections that I'm not even sure that there are main gameplay sections. There are agency gadgetbot puzzles, giant Clank sections, even motherfucking snowboard sections, among many more. My least favorite of those would probably be the tailing missions that are pretty easy to fuck up, which means that you have to start all over again, and my favorite are probably the rhythm minigames. Secret Agent Clank again is not great if compared to the mainline Ratchet & Clank games, but I feel like this is exactly what the spin-off title should look like. It takes side characters and puts them into the spotlight. It tries crazy new things that probably wouldn't be possible in a mainline game, and most importantly, it tries to be its own thing. I appreciate Secret Agent Clank for what it is. Man, was I hyped when this game got announced. Technically, it was only 2 years since the last mainline Ratchet & Clank game, if you count Deadlocked. But time flows slower when you're young. It's true, time flows faster and faster as you get older, and you'll soon turn 30 and realize that you're now closer to being 60 than to your actual birth, and that we're all being consumed by an unstoppable black void of death. Okay, what I was trying to say is that I was really looking forward to the first next-gen Ratchet & Clank game, and I almost couldn't believe how good the graphics looked in the screenshots. I've played the very first level at a gaming convention, was blown away and played the demo over and over again when it later was released on consoles. So a lot of this honeymoon phase is gone now, but I still really enjoyed playing the game again. The first PS2 Ratchet game has been a showpiece for what the system could do, and this first Ratchet game on the PS3 carries on with that tradition. The aforementioned city of Metropolis looks absolutely stunning in the new engine, and Sargasso, a more open planet inhabited by dinosaurs, is exactly what you would show someone who wouldn't believe that the PS3 was much more than a slight upgrade to the PS2. Maybe that's also why Insomniac showed it off in promotional material so much. The story received a next-gen upgrade as well, with going much more in depth about the origins and desires and fears of both Ratchet and Clank. The journey starts off with Emperor Tachyon, the last of the Kragmite race, hunting down Ratchet, whose own Lombax species led to the defeat of the Kragmites. Eventually, this leads to the introduction of a whole lot of new characters to the series, such as Talwyn, Captain Slag, and of course the robots Kronk and Zephyr. Without going into too much detail, Tools of Destruction also introduces the Zoni, and with them goes into much more depth surrounding Clank's story and his purpose that is way bigger than just being an anomaly on a production line. And spoiler, but necessary plot point for the next game, so skip this part if you still want to play it. The game ends with a cliffhanger. The Zoni take Clank away to an unknown location and Ratchet is alone now. I found this really sad when I first played it. Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction's engine was built off the engine from Resistance Fall of Man, Insomniac's first and also a launch title for the PlayStation 3. But although more than 70 full-time employees worked on the game, the team was understaffed for a project of that scope, and even with the experience from making Resistance, the PS3 was notoriously difficult to develop for. Because of that, Tools of Destruction was originally meant to be a much larger game. Insomniac wanted to implement 25 planets, but they only managed to create 16. They wanted to add both a co-op and an online mode, which both were cut, and they also had to reduce the amount of cutscenes, among other things. But it still doesn't feel as if anything was missing from a full-blown Ratchet & Clank experience, and I think that is partly because the game is so polished, which kinda proves that quality is more important than quantity. Insomniac even stated that they had to teach new game designers how to stack crates in a way that is satisfying for the player. The game still features on-rails space combat missions, Clank puzzles, 6-axis controls, I'm sure you forgot about that one, and a gladiator arena. This time there are a ton of interesting new gadgets and weapons that have become fan favorites ever since, such as the Groovitron, which makes enemies dance. I mean, what in the world could be better? This is also the first mainline game that stopped having a lot of that edgy humor from the original games, which doesn't sit too well with a lot of longtime fans, myself included. But if you can look past that, Tools of Destruction is still a blast to play through today. Originally, Quest for Booty was planned as a DLC to Tools of Destruction in order to build a bridge between the plot of the first and the next mainline game. But the concept of how to exactly realize add-ons wasn't entirely thought through in 2008. Because of that, Quest for Booty became a standalone game that was only about 3 to 4 hours long while costing $15. This led to some reviewers not taking too kindly to the game. Nowadays probably no one would care. But still, Quest for Booty was a commercial success, and if you can't get it cheap and play it now, you can go in with a different mindset. With that being said, Quest for Booty is a great game. The shorter format with a more grounded story is astonishingly refreshing. Insomniac tried to reuse many assets from the previous game and therefore opted to set the game in a pirate base. And the pirate theme? Come on, who doesn't like pirates? Ratchet's quest of finding Clank leads him there because a pirate named Darkwater apparently knows a lot about the Zoni, and now that I think about it, this game has Clank in the title, although he doesn't ever physically appear in the game, right?
Clank! Clank, are you out there?
Darkwater's dead.
Quest for Booty also has beautiful art design and an awesome soundtrack that was composed after someone in the meeting room said, "How far can we go before getting sued for copyright infringement?" The only negative thing that I can say about this game is that it doesn't really have any replayability. Why does the shortest game in the Ratchet & Clank universe not have a challenge mode? And why does the game only feature some of the weapons from Tools of Destruction without adding any new ones? And the weapons that are in the game start off with level 3 and can only be upgraded 2 more levels. I feel like they could have easily added more replay value. But the game itself is still worth playing today, and I'm glad it exists. Oh, and by the way, Insomniac Games actually got sued for this one. Not because of the music, but because of Slag singing I'm a Little Teapot in a scene. Always check if anything is owned by anyone, kids. In 2009, the next mainline entry in the Ratchet & Clank franchise came out. In fact, this would be the last mainline game for a long time. For some odd reason, Sony didn't allow the proposed title of Ratchet & Clank Clock Blockers, so they went with A Crack in Time. Both continuing and bringing the future saga to an explosive close, A Crack in Time begins with Ratchet still searching for Clank. Clank, meanwhile, has been inside the Great Clock, the most complicated machinery located at the exact center of the universe. There he had remained in custody by none other than Dr. Nefarious and his butler,
Lawrence! Right here, sir.
The story goes into much more depth surrounding the origin of Ratchet and introduces Alistair Azimuth, a character that was a childhood friend of Ratchet's father. For most people, it seems, A Crack in Time is the best PS3 Ratchet game. But for some reason I always thought that I enjoyed Tools of Destruction a bit more. I don't know if that was because I was hyped so much more for the release of the first game, or because of something else. But after playing all of the Ratchet games back to back, I see why A Crack in Time is the better game now. This game takes almost all of the mechanics of the first Future game and refines them or adds something new. As you know by now, Insomniac had to cut back on a lot of ideas for Tools of Destruction because it was so difficult figuring out the quirks of developing for the notoriously complicated PS3 hardware and still release the game on time. Cut content included small spherical planets like the one from the PS2 games and open space exploration. But for this game, they added all of those ideas back in. A Crack in Time features bigger levels that encourage exploration, a kind of a semi-open world space hub that lets you explore various mini-planets, new mechanics such as constructor mods for specific weapons, the hover boots that change up traversal in a big way, and in my opinion, to this date, the best Clank puzzles that we ever had. Yes, I said it. Just thinking about this game makes me want to play it again, and that's a feeling I thought I only had with the original trilogy. The Future trilogy is different, yes. It doesn't have the humor and the edgy feel of the original games, and I still miss that. But it is its own new thing. And A Crack in Time is a worthy climax to a new era of Ratchet titles. But wait, there is more? Oh, I bet you will enjoy it, kid! We did something different this time. It's a 4-player co-op game with a more zoomed out camera. I mean, you can play it alone if you want. Oh, and Nefarious is back and is friends with everyone now. Alright, so first, the good. The art design is exceptionally beautiful. Okay, now the bad. This game is not a good Ratchet game. You can choose between 4 characters, but everyone feels the same and none of them feel like Ratchet. You can play it alone, but you will get an AI partner, and the AI is so bad that it almost never does what you want it to do, which is funny for the first 20 minutes and just frustrating after that. I didn't remember a single thing that happened in the story because it was so forgettable, and worst of all, the game is riddled with bugs to this day, and the game really struggles to maintain a constant frame rate at times. Which is very weird considering that Insomniac is a studio that is usually known for their polished games. Though honestly, I feel like I have been too hard on this game, and you'll understand why when you know the story behind its development. Insomniac made 7 Ratchet & Clank games up to this point, and very understandably wanted to do something else now. A Crack in Time was meant to be their final Ratchet game, at least for a while, but Sony had other plans and not only asked them to make another Ratchet & Clank game, but somehow bring Nefarious back because fans loved him. Now, what comes next is pure speculation from my part, but I feel like if Insomniac really had to do another game, they at least wanted to try something different, and that would be an understandable decision. But probably because of that, the Ratchet & Clank franchise feels slapped onto this game. Think about it. If this wouldn't be a Ratchet & Clank game, it wouldn't be all that bad. A nice little co-op game with 4 different characters that is aimed at a younger audience. Regrettably, Sony rejected the working titles Ratchet & Clank 4Play and Ratchet & Clank Bros Before Foes, and I have no idea why. Full disclosure, I didn't play Full Frontal Assault or Q-Force as it is known in Europe when it came out. I played the demo, though it was meh, and I lost interest. With another new spin on the series after All for One, this one, my friends, is a tower defense game. Planned especially for the 10th anniversary of the series, Full Frontal Assault features 3 playable characters, and yes, they kick nefarious. It has light platforming elements and combat, but at its core, it's a tower defense game, which means that the gameplay consists of defeating waves of enemies with strategically placed defense systems that you can buy and upgrade with bolts from defeating more enemies. The basic concept doesn't sound bad and is also nothing new, but when I learned that this one is the worst reviewed Ratchet & Clank game of all time, with a score of 64 on Metacritic, which is even lower than All for One's 70, I was afraid. I was very afraid. And playing it, I kinda got similar vibes as from the last deviation from the formula, as in, this is a game that could be quite good and stand on its own, but for some reason it has to look like a Ratchet & Clank game, and therefore it does neither of these things exceptionally well. But honestly, I didn't think it was that bad, and I definitely had a better time playing it than All for One. The gameplay loop can be quite addictive, and the open levels work quite well for this concept. As a spin-off title, this one isn't horrible. I feel like a lot of fans back then expected a new Ratchet & Clank game that is just like the old ones, and I mean, who could blame them? It says it right there in the title. And if you bought this game or the one before with that expectation in mind, you were probably and understandably pretty upset about it. But if you don't think about it as a mainline Ratchet & Clank game, Full Frontal Assault really isn't all bad if you play it today. I honestly would love for you to try it and tell me what you think in the comments. Luckily, Insomniac Games listened to the fans' feedback and went almost back to the roots once again. I mean, they were still probably pretty burned out by this point, but God, I wanna play a new Ratchet game. Again, a shorter Ratchet & Clank experience, Into the Nexus, came out in 2013 and technically still belongs to the Future trilogy. It can be seen as kind of an epilogue to the whole saga and is really about Ratchet coming to terms with his decisions from a crack in time. According to the game director, he finally wanted Ratchet to feel like Ratchet again, and I think that the team definitely succeeded. As with Quest for Booty, this shorter format seems to work quite well here. Only this time, there actually is some replay value with a challenge mode, an arena and 12 weapons from which 8 are new. They can only be upgraded to level 3, but can be further modified with the use of Raritanium. I don't really have a lot to say about this game, to be honest, but it is definitely one of my secret favorites. Into the Nexus, I guess because of the great ban of long titles in 7006's Lithuania, don't look it up, just believe me, okay? It's just called Nexus in Europe. And it has some of the best art and level design in the series, at least in my opinion, that makes the game darker. Not only metaphorically, but like literally, with the addition of some really cool light and dark gameplay. Overall, Into the Nexus is a little bit more grounded, but still lots of fun, and has some Clank puzzles that actually don't suck. What more could you possibly want? The years went by, civilizations crumbled, and galaxies collided with each other. And then, finally, Insomniac Games made a new Ratchet & Clank game in 2016. This one was just called Ratchet & Clank, like the very first game from 2002, and that was intentional. This was going to be a reboot and a remake of the first Ratchet & Clank game with graphics built from the ground up. For me, that sounded like a dream come true. Would it be a one-to-one remake of the original? Maybe paired with a couple of quality of life improvements? Count me in. Well, Insomniac also made a Ratchet & Clank movie in 2016. I didn't see it, but word on the street is, it was shit. So the film and the game were kinda intertwined. Some cutscenes were taken straight out of the movie, and some 3D assets were passed from the film to the game and back, which is kinda cool if you think about it. But that workflow also brought a much more, let's call it family-friendly tone into the Ratchet & Clank game series, which didn't sit too well with a lot of fans, again, myself included. Even the game itself is way easier. And the story is similar to the first game with a couple of changes, which normally wouldn't be too bad. For example, I quite like how this story is told from Quark's perspective and therefore allows for a little more creative freedom. But then, for example, they also shoehorned Dr. Nefarious into the plot, who didn't appear up until the third game in the series. To be frank, I did enjoy this game when it came out, but there was something that just kept bothering me. And I only noticed when I played through the game for a second time in challenge mode. I skipped all of the cutscenes, and I usually never do that. I then noticed how flat the story was, how annoying the constant dialogue during gameplay seemed, and that a lot of scenes were changed but not for the better. Please take a look for yourselves. This is how the original Ratchet & Clank game handles Clank returning to his birthplace.
I will try to make you proud, Mom.
And this is how the remake does it.
Oh my. This assembly line is the place of my creation. I am experiencing many conflicting feelings.
I guess you see what I mean. Also, for some reason, Quartu, which is the planet that you're seeing right now, and other planets have been significantly expanded, while some planets like Eudora and Altanis are entirely missing from the new game. They even turned Battalia into a snow world because they cut the original snow world Hoven from the game. And I guess there can't be a platformer without a snow level, right? Again, I wouldn't have minded a couple of changes to the original formula. Usually I'm open for that kind of shit. For example, bringing in weapons from newer titles such as the Groovitron doesn't sound like a bad idea. But if it's at the expense of cutting other weapons, story bits, and even entire planets that were in the original game, I just don't get how anyone thought that would be a good idea. But again, I feel like I'm hating too much on this game as well. The gameplay aspect is fantastic. The game looks and feels almost perfect, even today. On the PS5, the remake now runs in 60 frames per second if you're into that kind of stuff. And the levels from Ratchet & Clank 2002 have been so lovingly recreated that it's just a joy to travel from planet to planet, slowly walk around and see how familiar but so much better everything looks. The game definitely isn't all bad. I just would have preferred a one-to-one remake of either one of the first 3 games, and it kinda left a sour taste in my mouth, because I also feel like the mere existence of this game makes the future release of a true remake very unlikely. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally reached the end, for now. At the Sony PlayStation 5 reveal in 2020, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was announced to be a launch window title for the PS5. It slightly missed that launch window, but in June 2021, there it was. Finally, a full-blown new Ratchet & Clank game that continued the story and wasn't a spin-off or a remake. The plot takes place after the events of Into the Nexus. Dr. Nefarious uses the Dimensionator to find a reality where he always wins, and in the process damages the fabrics of space and time and creates multiple unstable dimensions. Whoops. Eventually, Clank lands in one of these dimensions and meets up with Rivet, a female Lombax. And gameplay-wise, you'll now switch between Ratchet and Rivet depending on the planet that you're visiting, while trying to stop Nefarious with combined forces. That, in my opinion, is a very refreshing take. I like Rivet. I think she takes up even slightly more screen time than our main protagonist, but it didn't bother me at all. Although she has a hammer instead of a wrench, she doesn't really feel that different to control, and all weapons and gadgets are shared between the two. Although, honestly, I would have preferred to be able to switch between the two characters at will, and maybe even for them to have different abilities, so maybe for one character to reach paths on planets that the other one can't reach, and vice versa. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was one of the very few PS5 exclusives when it came out, and that definitely shows. This series has always been a technical showpiece for its respective PlayStation platforms, and again on the PS5 it was taken to new heights. The dimension hopping, where it loads an entire new level in seconds with a seamless transition, still baffles my mind. Also, because of the PS5's SSD, the game has no loading screens when you load it up for the first time. Just a short fade to black and there it is. Although all cutscenes are not pre-recorded but rendered in real time, they most of the time even look better than the cutscenes from the Ratchet & Clank 2016 remake that were taken straight out of the movie. And they are doing some neat technical things with them as well, such as split screens and transitions, which are not as easy to pull off as they look and require the console to render two different locations at the same time. Levels are more open, which is a natural progression, I guess, even though I still prefer more linear Ratchet levels with a couple of different paths, but the selection of planets is really well thought out, with both really interesting new locations and alternate versions of already known planets such as Sargasso and Ardolis. The game features an astonishingly huge arsenal of 20 weapons, including my to this day favorite version of the Rhino that I mentioned opening Rhino 8. Most of these weapons really take advantage of the DualSense controller. For example, if you use the Enforcer, a shotgun type weapon, you can decide how many barrels you want to use depending on if you push the trigger button only halfway through until you feel a resistance, or if you push past that resistance in order to fire out of all barrels at once. And the fully upgraded pixelizer emits a melody out of the controller that is entirely done by the haptic feedback vibrations and does not come out of the speaker. How cool is that? The game definitely feels like the most polished Ratchet game Insomniac has ever made. The only downside is that there are not as many gadgets and therefore puzzles in Rift Apart, but I guess it makes it up with a variety of gameplay activities such as flying missions, glitch sequences and Clank gameplay. I'm not the biggest fan of the sections with glitch because it's more just shooting than anything else, but the Clank gameplay is really thought out and I would have loved to have even more and more intricate Clank gameplay sections. The soundtrack was co-composed by Mark Mothersbaugh, who among others also made the soundtrack for Thor Ragnarok, and if you haven't noticed by now, this game is absolutely gorgeous. I would go as far as to say it is one, if not the best looking game that I have ever played. Really, the only rather negative thing that I can say about this game, and therefore lets me appreciate the original trilogy even more, is that it still has that more family-friendly tone instead of that edgy humor that made me fall in love with the PS2 titles. But if you can see past that and accept this as a new but different start for the Ratchet & Clank franchise, it is honestly not that huge of a thing anymore. I personally think this is the best Ratchet & Clank game since the original trilogy, and that is pretty awesome. For many players, this will be their first Ratchet game, the one that they will be most nostalgic for in a couple of years. This hopefully kicks off a new era of Ratchet & Clank games, and I for myself couldn't be more excited. But what about you? Which one is your favorite Ratchet & Clank game? Tell me in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, I love you all. See you next time.